I knew I was invisible the second the CEO gave his speech and didn't say my name once. Not even a generic thanks to the operations team. Not when he bragged about the 450% revenue surge. Not when he toasted innovation, with a glass of overpriced champagne I'd sourced during Q3 cost-cutting. The room smelled like Prosecco and entitlement. My name was Lena, but in Stratwell Dynamics I was mostly just her, or, can you check with ops? I'd built the systems. I'd negotiated the vendor contracts. I'd optimized the supply chain so well we slashed delivery times by 38%. But here I was, half-tucked behind the catering table, holding a lukewarm flute of bubbly like a stagehand at someone else's show. The banners were neon and nauseating. 450% growth, Stratwell rises. What they should have said was, we milled gold off her back and forgot to say thank you. I watched interns take selfies with the sales director. Watched marketing toast each other over TikTok campaigns they forgot to track metrics for. HR handed out branded tumblers like it was Oprah's favorite things. And me? I sipped warm champagne from the shadows and smiled like it didn't hurt. It always amazes me how 97% of people will hear stories like this and never think to subscribe or like the video. But it really helps our team keep sharing them, so if you're here, just tap that heart. Means more than you know. Anyway, the thing that really kicked me in the ribs wasn't the oversight. It was when the CEO tapped the mic and the room hushed like God had entered. He cleared his throat and said, now for the most exciting part of the night. I felt a flicker. I admit it. Just a glimmer of maybe. Maybe he'd mention the late nights. The weekends I didn't take. The fact that I'd missed my godson's christening because Q1 logistics were on fire and nobody else knew how to fix it. My shoulders actually straightened like some pathetic muscle memory of hope. Then he grinned and said, everyone, meet the future of Stratwell, my son Ethan. Cue applause. Loud, enthusiastic, unearned. A spotlight swung toward a kid who looked like he'd just been dropped off from a frat formal. Ethan smiled, awkward but confident in that way only nepotism can bestow. He waved and said, hey y'all. With the charm of a guy who thinks an MBA and a famous last name are interchangeable with experience. Ethan will be stepping into a leadership role. The CEO beamed. Senior strategy. He'll be shadowing some of our brightest minds. I knew what that meant. I was the only one whose calendar wasn't already full of fluff meetings and influencer brainstorming. I was the one they'd pair him with. To show him the ropes. The ropes I braided. The ones I pulled when everyone else went home. I looked around. No one flinched. No one whispered. No one saw what was happening. They were too busy clapping, too high on sparkling wine and corporate dopamine to realize the torch was being passed without even a nod to the person who lit it. I stood there, gripping my glass like it owed me money. Then slowly I clapped too. I even smiled. But something inside me folded in on itself, quiet and cold like the last dying ember of a fire everyone had already walked away from. Funny thing about building a legacy, they only remember your name if they need someone to blame. But I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. I took a sip. Let the sweetness coat my tongue. Then I did what I always do. Disappeared into the wallpaper and started making a plan. Ethan had the handshake of a man who'd never had to explain a missed deadline or deal with a supplier who ghosted mid-quarter. When he reached for mine, his palm was soft, hesitant, the kind of grip that says, I don't need to try. And why would he? His dad just handed him a six-figure title and a department full of people old enough to remember dial-up. I smiled as I shook it like any good corporate woman would. Because that's what they expect from you when they're replacing you in slow motion, graceful decay. Hi, you must be operations, right? He said, blinking like a Labrador wearing a suit. Something like that, I replied. He laughed. Dad says you'll help me get up to speed. Honestly, I'm just trying not to mess anything up. And there it was, like it was all just some video game he could fumble through until he leveled up. I should have been angry, but anger would have meant I still cared. What I felt was worse, the leaden stillness of being erased in real time. Not demoted, not fired, just slowly overwritten by someone who hadn't earned the ink. I excused myself before I could say something stupid. In the bathroom, I stared at my reflection under buzzing fluorescent lights. The kind that make your pores look like moon craters. I adjusted my collar, touched up my lipstick, and tried not to imagine grabbing the mic and asking, What exactly has Ethan strategized besides which pool party to black out at? I returned to the party. Walked past teams I'd mentored. Past people who used to come to me when everything fell apart. I was suddenly just Lena, the nice woman in ops who was training the CEO's boy genius. I poured myself another glass of champagne. This one tasted like spit and insult. I kept smiling. Kept nodding. I made small talk with procurement and laughed at HR's recycled jokes like a good sport. But inside, something was calcifying. A quiet verdict. I wasn't going to train my replacement. I wasn't going to prop up the mannequin they stitched together from khakis and bloodline. They wanted succession? Fine. But I wasn't sticking around to watch the crash. That night I didn't rage or cry. I didn't call my sister to vent or drink wine until I forgot my own name. No. I walked into my apartment, sat down at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. 5 folders stared back at me like loyal soldiers. Logistics Pro, Helix, Barton Fleet, Atlas Merge, and Westbridge. Clicked one open. Reviewed the notes. Highlighted the names of the people I'd spoken to for years. People who trusted me, not Stratwell's letterhead. I wasn't leaving out of spite. I was leaving because they'd already told me I didn't matter. I was just choosing to believe them. When the party finally wheezed to a close, after the interns finished Snapchatting their champagne flutes and the CEO kissed Ethan on the head like some Ivy League baby Jesus, he found me by the elevator holding my tote bag like a shield. His cheeks were still pink with champagne and approval. "Hey," he grinned. "You must be ops?" I paused, tilted my head, smiled like I wasn't imagining stapling his resume to a ceiling fan. "Something like that." He laughed, too loud and too proud of nothing. "Dad says you'll help me get up to speed. He said you're kind of like the glue around here." Glue. Not the architect. Not the backbone. Just something cheap and sticky they step over once things are stable. I nodded. Sure. Happy to help. Lie number 1. There would be more. He looked at me like I was his personal admin. Like my years meant nothing more than a colored tab on his calendar. The doors opened. I stepped in alone. And I swear in that moment, the quiet hum of the elevator sounded like applause for surviving another performance. By the time I got home, the makeup was cracking and the polite smile had long since peeled off. I toed off my heels, poured a glass of Pinot, and sat down with the only thing that ever gave me peace: process. My laptop lit up like an altar. 5 client folders. 5 names. 5 companies whose growth didn't come from Ethan's last name, but from my midnight calls, my rewrites of their forecasts, my on-the-fly patchwork when Stratwell botched delivery or finance forgot to process the payment. Helix. Barton Fleet. Logistics Pro. Westbridge. Atlas Merge. I opened Helix first. Reviewed the last 3 months of call logs. Saw a flagged note. Ask Lena about the fulfillment lag. That was me. Not Stratwell. Me. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is a flare. This was something colder. Calmer. Like standing in the snow with the matchbook still in your hand. They'd given me the answer. I was replaceable. So I decided to make that true, just not the way they expected. No fanfare. No announcement. Just precision. I opened a blank calendar and started scheduling. Calls. Catch-ups. Nothing official. No Stratwell branding. Just me. My name and what I already knew. These people didn't come for the logo. They came for the results. For the woman who fixed things. And now? Now she had nothing left to lose. By the time most of Stratwell was sleeping off champagne and shrimp cocktail, my calendar looked like a war plan. 5 calls. No Stratwell logo, no company Zoom link. Just my Gmail, my voice, and the same competence they counted on for years without ever bothering to properly credit. Helix was first. Tanya, the COO, joined the call with a mug of coffee and a grim expression. "I've been meaning to check in," she said, pushing her glasses up. "Something feels off on your side. You okay?" I told her I was stepping back. That I might be operating solo in the near future. I didn't pitch her. I just explained what I've been responsible for. Not in a braggy way. Just facts. Like, the logistics escalation she assumed came from Stratwell's vendor team? That was me rerouting shipments from my living room at 11 p.m. The revenue dip recovery in Q2? Me again. Her jaw tightened. She didn't say yes. She didn't need to. I could feel it shift. Next up was Barton Fleet. Ramon looked stunned. You're leaving Stratwell? I'm not announcing anything, I said. Just exploring. I walked him through the workflow audits I'd built. The back-end tools I customized because Stratwell's off-the-shelf garbage couldn't keep up with Barton's expansion. I reminded him how I handled the overseas hiccup with their U distributor. Quietly, effectively, without billing him extra. His camera went silent for a moment, and when it flicked back on, he looked different. Not like a client. Like a man trying to keep a valuable asset from walking out the door. By the time I reached Westbridge, the pattern had set in. Concern. Curiosity. And that one repeated phrase. Wait. You're leaving? I never confirmed. I didn't have to. People hear tone louder than words. And mine said everything. Each call built on the last. I wasn't bragging. I wasn't even selling. I was just revealing the infrastructure they'd unknowingly built their trust on. The logo on the email? It never mattered. I was the deliverable, the bandwidth, the insurance policy in human form. And now I was walking out the door on my own terms. Quiet. Clean. By midnight, my apartment was dark and silent except for the soft click of my keyboard and the faint thrum of confidence sliding back into my bones. They'd replaced me with a surname. I was replacing them with clarity. By Monday at 9:12 a.m., Stratwell Dynamics smelled like fear disguised as citrus air freshener. You could feel it in the way people clicked too hard, walked too fast, avoided eye contact like it might trigger a subpoena. I walked in like it was any other day. Iced coffee in one hand, unread emails in the other, but the air had changed. It buzzed, frenzied and off-key. Like a hive that had just realized the queen was gone and nobody knew who was steering the swarm. Sales was unusually quiet. That was the first sign. Normally, those guys couldn't stop congratulating themselves. But this morning all their doors were shut. I passed two of them whispering in the hallway, voices tight, glancing over their shoulders like they'd seen a ghost in the quarterly forecast. Then I heard my name. Not from someone I respected, of course. From Ethan. He jogged over in his new blazer, hair still wet like he'd barely made it in on time. I don't think the weight of what was happening had reached him yet. His voice was all sunshine and spreadsheets. Hey, Alina. Quick question, he said like we were peers on a school project. Did something happen with Logistics Pro? I turned slowly in my chair, sipped my coffee. They're saying they need to pause. Whatever that means, he added with a shrug. Like he was waiting for me to tell him which button to push to make it all better. I smiled. Not fake. Just light. Calm. Probably reviewing options, I said. He laughed, too fast, too forced. Right, yeah. Reviewing. I mean, they'd never actually leave, right? I tilted my head. Stranger things have happened. And then I turned back to my screen. He stood there for a second too long. Like he was waiting for reassurance. A lifeline. Some kind of warm maternal guidance I had no intention of giving. I didn't know him a map through the storm. I was the storm. He just hadn't realized it yet. By noon, the whispers had turned into meetings. Panic-cloaked in buzzwords. Strategic reevaluation. Client-side uncertainty. Internal recalibration. Logistics Pro wasn't the only one sending cryptic emails. Helix had gone dark. Barton Fleet wanted to hold off on their next phase. Westbridge asked to reschedule indefinitely. Interns started asking questions. Middle management started pretending they had answers. The CEO hadn't come out of his office all morning. No one had called my name. No one asked me to fix it. Which was hilarious considering I was the only one who even knew how the back-end systems really worked. It wasn't rage. It wasn't vengeance. It was gravity. They wanted growth. I gave them a reminder. Even rockets fall when you ignore the engineer. By Tuesday at 10:47 a.m., the company looked like a wedding reception after the groom skipped town. Balloons from the 450% growth party still clung to the ceiling like forgotten promises, but nobody was celebrating. You could almost hear the panic breathing through the walls. Logistics Pro had gone first. Then Helix. Barton Fleet. Westbridge. And now Atlas Merge. Each of them had either paused deliverables or delayed next phase implementation. Corporate speak for, we're done with Stratwell. The sales team tried spinning it as seasonal churn. The COO barked something about consolidation waves. But none of that explained the very real, very sudden drop in revenue projections now glowing red on every dashboard like a hemorrhage. They were bleeding. Quietly but fast. I was at my desk sorting through vendor contacts when my phone buzzed. Internal extension. 2001. The corner office. I didn't rush. When I stepped into the CEO's office, he looked like someone had replaced his spine with a coat hanger. His usual smirk, cocky, too white, too polished, was gone. The blinds were half closed like that it blocked the crisis from seeping in. He gestured toward the seat across from him. I took it back straight. "Lena," he said, smoothing his tie with trembling fingers, "we need to talk." I waited. He cleared his throat. "This client situation. It's not good. But I think if we work together we can turn this around." I didn't blink. "You've built those relationships," he went on like I didn't know. "They trust you. You can fix this. Whatever this is. Maybe get them back to the table. Ease concerns." He leaned forward like we were teammates. Like he hadn't just tossed me aside for his overgrown intern of a son. I noticed the sweat gathering behind his ear. The faint tremor in his pinky. I reached into my bag and placed the folder on his desk. He opened it. His eyes scanned the top page, then froze. Each page after that was a contract. Simple. Clean. Signed by every one of our my top 5 clients. But none bore Stratwell's name. At the top of each, Northline Strategies LLC. He looked up, jaw half dropped. "You started your own?" I smiled faintly. "You poached them?" He whispered, like we hadn't just spent 5 years letting sales poach my credit and marketing poach my language. I tilted my head. I offered value. They chose. He sat back stunned. I didn't gloat. Didn't monologue. Just stood and adjusted the cuffs on my blouse. "They thought I'd stay loyal to titles," I said quietly. "But I never worked for titles. I worked for results." I let that hang in the air like smoke after a clean shot. Then I walked out and I didn't look back. By Wednesday morning, Stratwell's all-hands meeting might as well have been a funeral. The group chat pinged like a Geiger counter. Everyone trying to make sense of the headline now spreading like mold across inboxes and industry slacks. Stratwell's top clients migrate to independent consultant. They didn't even try to soften it. No sources close to the matter or alleged. Just the truth served cold. 5 major contracts gone. And in their place, my name front and center. Northline Strategies. I walked into the building like I always had. No bodyguards. No sunglasses. Just the woman they'd all called reliable behind closed doors and replaceable when they thought I couldn't hear. The receptionist didn't make eye contact. She suddenly discovered her keyboard needed deep contemplation. HR, who'd been aggressively perky every week leading up to Ethan's debut, sat behind their frosted glass like they were in mourning. One of them glanced up, opened her mouth, then closed it. Like she was about to say hi, but remembered she'd helped plan my obsolescence. The COO passed me in the hallway and muttered, barely audible, "We may have a conflict of interest issue." I stopped. "Conflict of interest," I repeated. Interesting choice of words. Feels more like a correction, of course. He didn't respond. Just shuffled off like a man realizing the iceberg wasn't coming. It had already split the hull. Ethan? He was a ghost. I spotted him once in the break room, fumbling with the espresso machine like it owed him answers. He saw me, hesitated, then looked down at his shoes like they might offer an escape route. I didn't chase him. I wasn't interested in confrontation. That would have given him too much credit. Let them sweat. Let them guess how much I had planned and how much was just the universe keeping receipts. At 2:11 p.m., the CEO sent a company-wide memo titled, "Refocusing Our Strategic Direction." It was full of empty phrases like, leaner structure, and client synergy realignment. But the tone was unmistakable. Damage control dressed in buzzwords. I read it once, then deleted it. By 4 p.m., the operations dashboard was down. Engineering said it was a load balancing issue. But I knew the truth. I'd built those systems. I'd monitored the back-end traffic. I was the ghost in their machine, and now that I was gone, the machine was coughing up blood. I didn't gloat. I didn't post a cryptic LinkedIn update or start subtweeting the fall. I just sat in my old office chair one last time, looked around at the empty-eyed staff and quietly smiled. It wasn't personal. It was physics. When the foundation leaves, the walls remember. By Friday, I didn't even pack a box. There was nothing worth taking. Not the coffee mug with the chipped handle. Not the worn-out chair that clicked when I leaned back. Not the framed Team Excellence 2019 certificate they'd handed me like a dog treat for staying quiet while others took the credit. I left it all. Let the office keep the memories they never appreciated. No final Slack messages. No dramatic inbox goodbyes. No, it's been an honor email to people who wouldn't have looked up if I'd set my desk on fire. They didn't deserve closure. They deserved silence. That morning, HR requested a transition meeting. Said they wanted to ensure a knowledge transfer. I replied with a one-sentence email. All the knowledge walked out with me. They came back with a number. A generous one. A transition bonus to keep me just long enough to plug their leaks. I declined. Politely. Didn't even let it bruise my ego. I didn't need their money. I already had 5 new contracts, and the one thing they could never buy, proof. Proof that my value was never in their org chart, it was in the execution. And now, I was executing on my own terms. That same afternoon, I walked into a co-working space downtown with 2 people they barely remembered. Jonah and Priya. My old analysts. Sharp, relentless, and like me, routinely overlooked in favor of flashier titles with flimsier track records. Stratwell had filed both of their exit interviews under non-essential attrition. What a joke. Jonah built the pipeline Stratwell sold as proprietary AI forecasting. Priya saved our Atlas merge contract by flagging a multi-million-dollar import discrepancy before it went nuclear. Now they were mine. I bought them coffee. We sat at a clean white table, laptops open. The sun pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows like a sign from the universe. We rebranded together, picked a name that meant something. Northline Strategies. North because we were done going in circles. Line because we don't meander. Strategies. Because that's all we'd ever done. Just never under our own banner. We didn't throw a launch party. No champagne, no hashtags. Just 3 people with laptops, grit, and a plan. By the end of the day, our new site was live. Our inbox was full. Our calendar was booking itself. Stratwell had a legacy. That was their problem. We had momentum. And we weren't slowing down. 3 months later, Stratwell quietly announced the closure of 2 divisions. No press release, no big LinkedIn statement. Just an internal memo that leaked faster than their Q4 pipeline. Logistics folded first. Then strategic planning, the very department they'd handed over to Ethan like a family heirloom. Turns out, you can't run an empire on nepotism and buzzwords when the actual foundation walks out the door. I read the memo over my morning coffee, cross-legged on the balcony of my new apartment, top floor, paid in full. My inbox was already humming with new inquiries. One of our clients had just referred Northline to a global consultancy group. Another wanted us on retainer before their next audit cycle. Word had spread fast, but not loud. Just the way I liked it. Jonah messaged me around noon. FYI, Stratwell's site now lists Ethan as advisor emeritus. No mention of senior strategy. I didn't reply. What was there to say? The kid never had a strategy. He was the strategy. A warm body and a button-down meant to distract everyone from the fact that the company had no bench strength left. At 3:42 p.m. I got the call. Unknown number. Professional voice. Hi, this is Vanessa Cho from the Business Ledger. I've been following the Stratwell situation and I wanted to ask, off the record, were you the one behind the client migration? I smiled into the silence for a moment, letting the question hang like fresh linen in the breeze. Rumor says a lot of things, I replied. What do you think? She laughed. I think the timing speaks for itself. That night I sat down to finalize a new contract, our biggest yet. Westbridge had signed a 2-year deal with us, bypassing Stratwell entirely. They called it a strategic reset. I called it poetic symmetry. No fireworks. No revenge post. Just a clean PDF, a direct deposit, and the soft click of momentum building on its own. I thought back to that party. The fake applause. The champagne. The moment they introduced my replacement like I was already a relic. They thought the celebration was theirs. They never saw me walk out with the actual prize. Their trust. Their systems. Their future. Turns out the real celebration was mine. Just quieter.